Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Kaga, and I've got a little bit of a surprise for you. This is going to be... I know that the German battleships are all the rage, but you know what? We need something different, and when I saw this replay come in from a good old friend of mine, most of you probably remember WO9 from some of my earlier videos. I think most of them were related to this ship, the Iowa. Well, he's back, and he's got another good performing game in the Iowa. And it's kind of funny, he plays a lot of the Iowa. Last I heard, it was somewhere over the neighborhood of a few thousand games in this ship, which admittedly, I'm the kind of person who just goes down, collects ships, plays a few games, and then moves on. Nope, not WO9. Most certainly not WO9. I think he's chasing that elusive all points captain in there with the, I think it was like 19 skill points on the captain. Dear God, I don't have that kind of patience, but well, he does. Anyway, so we're partly going to just let the footage in the background play because I think it speaks for itself on how people can unleash the potential of their US battleships, particularly like the North Carolina and the Iowa itself. What we're going to be talking about is a little bit more to do with the battleship line as a whole, and of course the high tier meta, and maybe some of the general game progression if I have time. So recently, well, maybe not so recently, but I think at least a patch or so back, the US battleships received some quite needed love from, well, at the time we thought it was really needed love from Wargaming in the form of some buffs to various quantities on the ships. Perhaps most notably, but what you felt in every match that you've faced one of these battleships, doesn't matter what tier of US battleship really we're talking about, but is the effect of the US battleship specific accuracy upgrades, which basically turn these ships into citadel spitters. You put in shells, you point them at that's right, you put shells into the guns, let's get that right, you point them at the enemy, and basically the ship will just print citadels for you. Well, yes and no. It's still a battleship, right? We're gonna expect to do a certain amount that way. But it's definitely, that is perhaps the single biggest change really since the last video I put up, was that extra, let's see, there was that 16%, and I believe there was an additional 10% one. So you kind of get this effectively 116% on that, and almost like 120% buff to what was there before. Well, it's not. I'm not going to say that's percent change. That's just the percentage, the accuracy that you would be seeing, and take that number you'd see stock and just divide it by that 1.2, and you basically get what you expect for these guns to produce. And I would dare say that, you know, before the buff, that it was a very needed improvement for the US battleships. They kind of, well, they didn't really have much in the way of the armor department unless they were directly head-on, and with exception to when they decided to challenge a Yamato, and we all know how that works out. The presence of aircraft has diminished greatly in recent patches, so their solo warrior-esque, not really needing to worry as much about same-tiered aircraft carriers is, well, that's not really a plus anymore. So they don't have the best caliber of guns, therefore don't have the best penetration in comparison, you know, like Yamato, we're looking at you. So that accuracy was kind of needed, and forgive the little kill steal here. I know 20,000 is not exactly what you'd call a kill steal, but that Tirpitz had him. Well, I guess a kill's a kill, right? And I know that doesn't fit the, like, definition a lot of people would consider a kill steal, but as someone that does like using torpedo carrying ships in the game, yeah, that definitely reeks of kill steal to me. So I think for me, the point where these guns start performing a little too well is when you have, like, say, in Iowa or North Carolina, who wants to engage an enemy destroyer some 9 kilometers away, 10 kilometers away with their major caliber guns, because, you know, they get a certain destroyer gets spotted by radar or something like that. Well, just firing the front 2 batteries is usually enough to, if not completely erase said destroyer, completely ruin his ability to be aggressive that match there on out. And I don't know. If you want to go with that classical or semi-classical Rochambeau or rock, paper, scissors type of game model that was originally put into the game, not that it actually ever worked, well, yeah, you've given the US battleships at high tiers cruiser level accuracy, but does that mean that they should be so accurate that they completely negate the reason to have a cruiser on your team? I don't know, that doesn't seem right to me, you know? So in light of that, I must actually be forced to reverse my prior opinions and state that perhaps the accuracy buffs need to be toned down a little bit. I don't know how much would be a correct balancing, since you have to balance both against both enemy battleships and still allowing the cruisers on an enemy team to actually stand a chance. That's going to be a tough one. But I don't know. I will just say, let me know in the comments what you think about that. Because I am curious, is this just me? Or is this kind of something that a lot of people have to say right now? So, with that more or less beaten to a pulp, I kind of want to move into high tier meta. And it seems to be, having survived closed beta, having gone through open beta into full release, and having thousands of games under my belt, and one thing I keep seeing time and time again is there's something about the high tiers that just, I don't know. The games are kind of, they're either epic or they're meh. And there's not much in between. You can't really just sit back and say you had a good game. It was either you had a great game or you had a crap game. There really isn't much in between. And I think it comes down to the fact that as you go up the ship lines, the ships, and I must harken to add this, every tier of ship gets, by like a power series or some type of progression curve like that much more lethal than the previous tier. And as a result, what you see is a fairly linear progression in terms of survivability and armor that has to compete with what is, to that effect, a square of the power it was being matched up against beforehand. And I don't know, when I'm looking at that, it basically means that it doesn't matter what wargaming does to the repair costs. What's going to end up happening is that the defense will always lose out, or it will always trump all, and nothing in between. What you're going to see as a result, and we do see this, is that people don't really engage. What you see are Yamato sniping fests, or bow-on brawls, which I suppose that's defensively the strongest part there, but it also justifies the absolutely broken HE and fire correlation. Likewise, it also means that, you know, all of a sudden you can justify having flooding be a absolutely devastating thing, even though, as anyone who's gone onto a ship could tell you, the type of the devastation you see in flooding in World of Warships is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, most of these ships, if they were under combat conditions, fires, they might spread, but they would be fairly localized until they burn their way through the bulkheads and aka melted. And same with flooding. Unless the flooding, the pressure of the water was so great that it burst open the ceiling latches on the doors, and trust me, if anyone who's seen them or manipulated them in person can tell you, they're not insubstantial. And therefore, it's like, when you look at the way it's modeled, it's like, what the... Somebody would be court-martialed for this. I know it's a game. I know it's a game. But at the same time, there should be a little more inspiration from, you know, actual, like, naval practices, right? No one in their right mind would leave all the passageways completely left open. I mean, that's a great way to get your ship sunk. I mean, when it comes to damage control, especially, it's like the best cure is prevention. In this case, the best way to deal with a problem is to deal with it ahead of time. And, well, again, you kind of see why then in this match, why that is necessary is that Bao battleships are quite fearsome opponents. And regardless if it's same tier or higher tier, and don't point at the Yamato, that is an exception. That is quite the exception as far as across all the battleship lines. We know about it. So please don't obsess over that. For your typical battleship, your typical cruiser, bow-on engagements are a nice way to level the playing field. And that's why you see a lot of it. Well, at least on the North American server, you see a lot of bow-on engagements. Now, leaving whether that's fun aside, or fun or not aside, that is just what you see. And it comes down to that, well, do you want to have a meh game or a bad game? Basically. I mean, yeah, you can have that awesome game like you're seeing in this particular match. But it also means that in the respect of the actual game mechanics, other vessels need some mechanism to damage you. For cruisers, well, there's high explosive. Well, the same for battleships, right? Basically, that is a way to guarantee damage and to keep the game alive, or to keep it interesting enough that people come in and it's not a 5-hour slugfest. Well, that's a problem. Really and truly. Because it's necessary up here, the mechanic must exist throughout the game. And what you see as a result is that you see this trend starting from very early tiers, and it continues through high tiers of just Ichi and fire spam. Now, leaving aside whether or not you benefit from it or you are absolutely tortured by it, I think we can all agree that there's just something not quite right going on with it. Yeah, maybe it's producing the relative damage numbers that Wargaming has outlined as being its desired metrics for every class in terms of average damage, But at the same time, it is perhaps one of the most frustrating things about the game, especially with the general purpose, the repair key, aka R, that means it's very difficult to do much of anything, really and truly. And I mean that in the sense that, well, once it's gone, and you're burning, and there's nothing a player can do about it. And again, it's because that mechanic exists because in high tier, well, there is no other way to do damage to someone who's completely Bao Wang. Now, I might be one to say that maybe we need to introduce more ammo types so we can tone down that mechanic. You know, give people the option of carrying shrapnel rounds or something else that does damage, does more modular damage, and has like virtually no chance of causing a fire but can still just be frustrating. You know, or encourage other teamwork, like, oh hey, I just landed some shrapnel rounds on X ship, friendly carrier, nuke it. Just things like that. Looks like I didn't really quite get to all that I wanted to cover today. I won't bore you any more than I have to. I'm curious on what you have to say on the stuff I covered today. Please let me know in the comments or on Google+, forums, etc. Just let me know. Anyway, thank you, and have a good day.